Ladies and gentlemen, the general session is about to begin. Please take your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Chief Technology Officer and Senior Vice President of Engineering, Operations and Technology at the Boeing Company, John Tracy.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to Day 4 of SciTech 2015. On behalf of the Executive Steering Committee, I'd like to thank you for being here for the world's largest event for aerospace research, development, and technology. We are all glad that you could be with us today for what will be a dynamic, insightful, and productive array of events. I'd also like to thank the scores of volunteers and committee chairs who helped plan and execute this forum. Without those whose hard work and dedication, many of our technical and programmatic sessions would not be possible. I'd like to thank our sponsors as well. We sincerely appreciate your generous support, which makes it possible for us to offer such a robust, relevant, and relatable program. In a few minutes, our morning plenary panel will discuss an issue of vital importance to our aerospace community. That topic is the need to make the aerospace workforce even more diverse and inclusive. Over the last 4 decades, we've seen growing awareness that a diverse and inclusive workforce is a key constituent of success in innovation-oriented fields such as aeronautics and astronautics. Both academia and industry have recognized the value of creating diverse teams featuring individuals from traditionally underrepresented groups, such as females and minorities. And I'm glad to see that many organizations and institutions have implemented different practices to create a diverse pipeline of talent. Still, we have yet to see the levels of diversity in both the workforce and management ranks that accurately reflect the demographics of the communities in which we operate. And with a sizable portion of our baby boomer era workforce approaching retirement, we face a legitimate challenge as well as a tremendous opportunity. It's a situation that our panel will explore. So with that, I'd like to introduce the moderator for this morning's panel, Dr. Sandy Magnus, Executive Director of AIAA. Sandy, please take it away.
Thank you, John, and good morning, everyone. Awesome, very good. We're happy to see you here. We've got a great panel today. It's a very important subject, and I'll introduce everyone in a moment, but I just would like to make the announcement on Tuesday at the board meeting. The AIAA board instituted a diversity working group that'll be looking at this problem from an institute-wide scan and see what kind of actions as an organization we can take to address. So we're hoping to get some recommendations, actions, and a really good discussion out of the panel this morning so that we can hand these items over to our working group and see what we can do about it. So keep that in mind as you think about questions and you listen to the wonderful discussion we're about to embark on. So we have a great panel, of course, this morning for you. I'm going to just do a brief introduction because I would rather have us jump into the meat of the subject. To my immediate left is Dr. Wesley Harris, who's currently the Charles Stark Draper Professor of Aeronautics and Astronautics and the Director of the Lean Sustainment Initiative at MIT. Dr. Harris has held a lot of different positions at MIT as well as at NASA. Just a wonderful range of experiences, and he'll be kicking off the panel here in just a moment. Immediately to Dr. Harris's left is Dr. Al Romig, and he's a vice president at Skunkworks, a long history there, knows a lot about the aircraft industry, has done some really great projects, although today he's here to talk about his experience in leading diverse teams and their importance. To his left is Dr. Yvette Weber. She's from the University of Maryland, and she has over 20 years working in the Air Force in a variety of jobs that span from basic and applied research to current weapon systems. She's currently the director of the C5 Developmental Systems Program Office of the Mobility Directorate, Air Force Materiel Command at Wright-Patt Air Force Base. So she's got a lot of extensive experience in the industry as well. To her left is Dr. Tom Shee, who's the professor and head of the School of Aeronautics and Astronautics at Purdue, also with an extensive background at different universities, bringing some wonderful experiences to us. And then finally on the end, to do the wrap-up for us today, Dr. Julio Navarro, who is a senior technical fellow of the Boeing company, and he specializes in high-efficiency integrated electronics and has 40 patents. And just as a note, to be a senior technical fellow at Boeing, that means he's in the top 10th of 1% of the 55,000-person engineering team. And Julio is also bringing the wealth of experience that he is in industry to this panel. So I would like to be quiet now and turn the floor over to Dr. Wes Harris, who can lead us into the panel.
Thank you, Sandy. And good morning, friends. I would like also to thank John Tracy and the Boeing Company and others, certainly the leadership of AIAA, for the opportunity to have a conversation with you on this very important issue of how the demographics are driving our industry, in fact, our country. What I would like to do is to present an opportunity space that defines why, in my opinion, we must be a bit more assertive in this effort. So my first chart talks about that opportunity space. Some of us have been in this business for several decades, certainly going back to the late 60s when the Sloan Foundation and the GE Foundation identified diversity within engineering as a major opportunity for this nation as we and as they projected the change in our demographics by 2050. A lot of that effort was based on moral imperatives, on affirmative action, on equal opportunity, on enhanced problem definition and solution, and if you wish, you may add your own beyonds. What I propose today to offer, based on research and analysis done by others, is that these are all good things to do, the moral piece, the affirmative action, the equal opportunity, etc. But we, in the aerospace industry, have an opportunity to move this effort based on economic imperatives, We, the aerospace industry, is one in which we are driven by high-skilled and high wages. We are a foundation when it comes to the production of national wealth. Through economic ups and downs, the aerospace industry still contributes to a positive balance of trade, perhaps greater than any other sector within the U.S. In order to keep this position, to continue to make our country strong, we need a more robust, a more competitive workforce. Therefore, the challenge and the opportunity for us is to close the educational achievement gap that exists in our country between native-born white citizens and our underrepresented minorities. The calculations based on economists, Tau Beta Pi members, Nobel Prize members in the calculation, suggest that if we were to close this educational gap by 2050, then we can identify trillions of dollars of growth in our U.S. economy. That the cumulative increase in our GDP is in the order of $20.4 trillion by 2050. So one outcome of this is that we will have a population that is very much like the dominant population. That means for us in this audience today, an increase in a demand for revenues coming from passenger miles. So this is not only an opportunity for us to look at a balance based on our need for gender and for moral and for affirmative action, but for us in this particular industry, it's an opportunity to have more airplanes, okay, to provide MRO for more airplanes, to continue to have high-skilled, high-wage jobs. Now these next two charts simply amplify what the opportunity space is like in terms of the GDP. And with this increase in the GDP, there is a parallel opportunity in terms of federal taxes to be paid by these citizens, as well as state and local taxes. What this means is that the opportunity space is not a win-lose, but a win-win. That is, the investments to close the gap not only provides an opportunity for more passenger seat miles, but an opportunity to pay for the investment itself through taxes, both federal, state, and local. And this chart, again, just amplifies that in terms of the cumulative effect. And there you see the $20.4 trillion increase in the GDP between 2014 and 2050. So to repeat, this is an opportunity for us. We are a high-skilled, a high-wage business. We need to continue to sustain our growth. We need to close the educational gap, and we can do it in a win-win scenario. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wes. Al?
Good morning, everyone. First off, one of the observations I would make that I think is just quite delightful is here we are on day 4 of a conference. 8 o'clock in the morning seems awfully early, especially for those of us that come from the West Coast. And yet I look out across the room and I'm delighted to see the number of people that are here. And I think that's an important metric to look at because certainly this whole issue, I think certainly has been gathering momentum of awareness over the course of the last couple of decades or so. And I think we're now at the point where it's really time to go about and do something about it and drive the issue home for exactly the reasons that Wes cited, and to treat some of the issues that we brought up by my colleagues off to my left up here. What I wanted to take my few minutes on and comment about is really the role of leadership in making sure that this issue is driven home and taken to heart and actions are taken to deal with the matter. And I chose the word leadership quite deliberately as opposed to saying management, because you don't have to be in management to be a leader. I think many of you know that. You can be, in fact, you can still be a student. You can be the senior who was seen as a leader by the underclassmen. You can be a graduate student who's about to defend your PhD thesis, and the younger graduate students look up to that person as one that is more wise. It can be the technical team, where you're the lead engineer, the program manager, whatever it might be, depending on the project. Or in fact, it could be somebody who sits in a true management role. And when you're sitting in one of those leadership positions, an old adage I'm sure all of you have heard before, what's far more important than what you say is actually what you do. And people will use that as a model for how they should behave, and just keep that in mind, that saying the right thing is only part of the equation. You really need to walk the talk, as they say. One of the examples that I like to cite for the value of diversity, and I suspect that virtually everyone in this room has experienced what I'm about to say, and if you haven't, if you're a student, my guess is that it won't take long and you will, and you may have in fact already seen it in a student project, depending on where you are and what curriculum you're in and so forth. But if you think about it, I'm going to give you a really, really tough technical problem to solve. I'm going to give you team A, I'm going to give you team B to solve that problem. And for the moment, let's forget about a lot of the typical axes of diversity that people think about around gender, ethnicity, and so forth. Team A are all, let's say, same degree level engineers from the same discipline, from the same school down the street. Team B is comprised of people that have degrees in multiple different engineering disciplines. They came from different schools, they've got different levels of experience, and they've got different degree levels. Those two teams are obviously, one of them, the second one, Team B, is obviously very diverse along those axes of diversity. Team A is obviously not. So think about it. Which one of those two teams do you think is going to be the best suited to solve a really difficult technical problem? And I would be stunned if anybody in the room says it's going to be Team A. I've actually seen Team A's try to solve problems, and I've seen lots of Team B's try to solve problems, and the results are quite starkly different from one another. So it's a matter of taking something that is not even related to what can sometimes be emotionally charged issues around diversity, but just think about the ability to solve problems. And at the end of the day, to try to tag on to what Wes was just talking about, solving problems quickly, efficiently, and effectively is how you drive a program forward, whether it's something you're doing in defense of the nation, obviously trying to do it in a way that's the most cost-effective for the taxpayer, whether you're trying to do something that will drive your company, that will assist the economy, it doesn't really matter. Developing things quickly, solving problems quickly and accurately is really what's needed at the end of the day to defend the nation, to make a company profitable, to make our entire economy profitable. And besides that, when you work as one cohesive team, regardless of all these various axes of diversity, it's a whole lot more fun. And I think all of us know that having fun while you work and getting the job done is really what it's all about. So just remember, it's what you do. Act appropriately, and your coworkers will begin to do the same if they don't already.
Thank you, Al. Yvette?
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here to talk about diversity. You know, one of the earliest thoughts of my thoughts on diversity were shaped shortly after I joined the Air Force. I was recruited heavily by another organization to come to them, probably and most definitely because I was female, Hispanic, and had a PhD in aerospace sciences. But I stayed with the Air Force. And why did I stay? And so why did I stay, and how to retain a diverse workforce are the focus of my comments. I'd also like to say that I think traditional definitions of diversity around women, minorities, underrepresented populations is a bit small. Today, we have a global environment. We're immersed in a global environment We work across the geographical divides. Many of us have teams that are at opposite ends of the country. And so we really need to learn to immerse ourselves in strategies that work for a more diverse population. So a couple of thoughts I have on retaining that diverse workforce are, number one, to look around at the workforce and is it diversity friendly? You know, one of the best ways to retain folks is to ensure that they can have a family workforce balance. You know, do we provide those flexible schedules that allow people to have that family and that career? And even if we provide them, do we really focus on that and allow people to have that family? Not just for women, but more and more men are charged with child care, and some of our population is charged with focusing on their elderly parents. We have a great disparity in age in our workforce, so we have to make sure that we can provide like flexible schedules. Do we provide our diverse members of our team with a mentor? Do you have a mentor? Is that mentor from the majority or the minority? Do you have both? Because both can be very effective. You know, the majority mentor can provide you with kind of the hidden rules of the road that aren't very well published, the way people are interpret things, and it can provide you with networking opportunities, while a minority mentor can help your understanding of the organization as well. And then on day-to-day operations, do we focus on team? It's about the team. It's not really about diversity, it's about the team. Everybody brings a piece of diversity to the team. So do we educate folks on teaming? Do we educate folks on conflict resolution? Because conflicts do come up, and they should be addressed, and they should be handled, and they should be welcome, because it's through the resolution of conflicts and differences that we get our maximum creativity. Do we look around our workspaces and look at the posters and the pictures we have around the workforce? Are they, when there are pictures of people doing work, are they only pictures of people in the majority? Or are they people and pictures of people in the minority? Subtle hints. What about the first day of work? Think about your first day. Do you remember your first day? Do you remember your 762nd day? No, but you do remember your first day at work. You know, how were you treated? Did people take the time to get to know you? I worked in a program office where on day one you got a lanyard and a pin, you know, so you felt like you belonged. You know, these are simple strategies for all of our employees, but especially our diverse employees, that can be used to retain the workforce, give them a sense of identity. And then, do you work on things that matter? Do you explain that contribution? Because working on things that matter is what drives us all. So in closing, I would say these are some of the strategies. They're not unique to the aerospace industry, but they are strategies that work. You know, why did I stay? Because the Air Force provided all of these opportunities, and I think we can take a lesson in some of them and implement them, whether we're leaders, managers, or co-workers. We can all be a little more inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvette. Tom?
Thank you, Sandy. It's an honor and privilege to be able to say a few words at this important gathering of the aerospace community, and I thank John Tracy and Sandy Magnus for organizing this plenary session, for being a part of it. I'd like to start by saying that we live in a great country. It is a country of immigrants. It is a country with enormous diversity. It is also a country that believes in and strives to treat everyone fairly and justly. And so we do have laws to provide people with equal opportunity for jobs and success, regardless of race, gender, religion, national origin, color, sexual orientation, and also for economic development that Yvette and Al and Ben and Wes mentioned earlier. But these laws were enacted in the 1960s, but these laws are necessary because we do have prejudices. These prejudices are not restricted to the majority. Actually, all of us have them. We're all human beings, and we all have failings. And so the question now is, but the majority, however, does have the responsibility to make sure things are right because they have the power. And so the fact that we have these laws, I think, shows that this country speaks, I think, very loudly of the values of this great country, and that it is all men and all women are created equal. So, however, so now that we have these laws for about 50 years, so the question is, have things gotten better from the perspective of diversity? And I think the answer isn't a emphatic yes. I think things have been better since the 60s. But the work is not done. And the reason the work is not done is that even this very enlightened age, we still have biases. And all of us have it. And these unconscious bias affects our behavior, our thinking. And so it is important for each of us to be self-aware of the biases that we have and put them in check when we form opinions, make decisions, interact with others. So I'd like to give maybe a few examples to illustrate some of this. As the first example, I'd like to take you back to the Winter Olympics in 1998 in Japan. Okay, in that particular Olympics, it turns out when Tara Lipinski beat Michelle Kwan and she was a favorite for the gold medal for figure skating, MSNBC's headline was "American beats out Kwan." For those of you who do not know Michelle is an American of Chinese descent who was born and raised in California, but she looked foreign. Okay. And so she was not regarded as an American. And so this reporter thought that she wasn't. So MSNBC very quickly apologized and changed the headline. But nevertheless, this particular example shows that if you look different, you might not be considered as American. So you can imagine if we have a sector of Americans who are not considered as Americans, they lose out on a tremendous opportunity this country has for them. And now I'd like to make an admission that I have made the same mistake based on this unconscious bias. At Purdue University, we have 10,000 international students on the West Lafayette campus, maybe 7,000 undergraduate, 3,000 graduate students. In academia, we have a lot of international students, and a lot of them are from China, mainland China, India, Korea, Japan, Taiwan. And so when I teach class, when I see anyone who's not the traditional majority, I think of them as foreign students. And it was only, and recently I came to realize that half of those students whom I thought were foreign students were actually domestic students. So even as I actually grew up in this country, and I have two grown kids who were born here, or they don't see themselves anything but Americans, and I'm a part of the Asian community, and I see an Asian, I think of them as foreigners. And so now I have to actually be much more careful. Now, why is that important? Well, because in the aerospace sector, we have a lot of opportunities that are only for U.S. persons. And therefore, I want to make sure that I do not deny those Americans of those opportunities. So again, it's something that's unconscious. There's no ill will, but it is subconscious or unconscious bias that we have to put in check. And still another example, I think sometimes we criticize minorities for not being a part of the team because they sit together in dinners, or they sit together in lunches or groups, and things, they clump. Okay, but the fact is, everybody clumps. The majority clumps also, but we don't always notice because they look the same. but if you're looking more closely, you find that they also sit together with people who they like, or they share similar interests. So the fact is, we all clump, but unfortunately, when the women and when the ethnic group, when they clump, we think of them as being not team players. They may have another agenda. They have something else they want to do. So our unconscious bias sort of poisons our view of that group. And still another example. I know that all of us, the majority, the minority, we suffer indignities and for ignorance. And so sometimes when we hear women or other minority, when they complain, we feel, well, we get it too, so what are you claiming about? but the fact is, I want to assure you that the women and the underrepresented minority, they suffer much more uncalled for frustrations than most of us. And it's hard to fathom how they feel until you walk in their shoes. I'm just give one example to illustrate. And sometimes, when a woman or an underrepresented minority, when they win an award or some coveted job, how many people question? Did they get it because they're a woman or because they're a minority? Why is it that when someone in the majority wins that job, nobody questions? By the way, the people that question is not just the majority, it's often the women also and the underrepresented minorities. So we all have this unconscious bias. So you can imagine, even when you win, you lose, right? But the pain that we inflict on those people is enormous. And one last example, and I think that when you are a part of a minority ethnic group, when you mess up, the feeling is that you mess up for everybody in your group. Okay? When we have a person, the majority, when they mess up, it's just that one person that messed up. But if a woman messed up, they say, look, that's a woman, right? Or some ethnic group. They have this tremendous pressure. And again, even when leadership, when they try to give awards or promotions to people in those groups, they even think very hard because they don't want to make a mistake either. So to think that it's easier, sometimes even harder, because they are sometimes subject to even more scrutiny. So I think in summary, I think we all have biases, all the majority and then the minority, we all have biases. But the responsibility, however, is on the majority and anybody with power and authority, because we have the power to make things right. The bottom line is that we have to make sure everyone has the opportunity to make sure that the country is strong for the reasons that Wes and Al and Yvette has said earlier. And so that's what we've got to do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Julio? You can
Thanks.
clap, it's okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Julio,
Thanks,
please.
thanks to the panel, and thanks to all of you who are attending. There's a real need in aerospace, just in industry in general, for the innovation and quality that our well-trained workforce brings, right? And those demographics of that workforce are changing. They're rapidly increasing in diversity. And as some have described, that this diversity of teams, typically a heterogeneous team or diverse team will perform better than a homogeneous one. I mean, there's a lot of data that shows that. So you would think that our workforce is diversifying, so that should be good news, right? Well, yes and no. In this particular case, the change in demographics includes a significant segment of the population that is currently not engaging in science and technology and engineering and math disciplines. So for aerospace, STEM is our bread and butter, right? We need it. It helps us maintain our technological edge. But even beyond our own industry, there's an increasing need in our country, as was stated by our group, to develop and to have a kind of like a renaissance in STEM participation. And consequently, this creates an opportunity for us in the field to fill that need. But how do we increase that participation? Is it a cultural issue? Is it one of economics? Perhaps appeal. Is there an appeal to what we do, or motivation? If it's not cultural or economic, how could we increase STEM appeal to motivate more and guide more youth to consider a career in STEM? There are many ideas that are floated about, and that we can achieve this through either more dollars, more competition, increased parental participation, smaller classrooms, better testing standards. Lots of ideas. Tons of ideas are everywhere. At this point, though, successes seem few, far between, difficult to gauge. I think that's part of the problem. It's hard for us to measure. For the past 50 or so years, our educational costs increase. There's more local, state, federal dollars spread out across the board. Teachers, mentors, trainers, volunteers, they spend millions of hours hoping to create a viable spark in our youth. Meanwhile, the need seems to remain and linger, and that's part of a problem. But some things are clear. I think that one thing that is true is that affluent students And those in the top percentiles, they will find their way to a good career. And that's good, you know. However, for a longer, more sustainable success of our country, we have to dig deeper, okay? Dig deeper into the student population. And this often means reaching down to the less affluent, to the underserved, to the not fully engaged minorities, okay? So why is that? So why aren't, and beyond just minorities, why aren't just kids more interested in STEM? You know, we think about this all the time, especially all of us who volunteer a lot. We try to find ways to stir the pot, you know, try to get them to imagine more. So if you say, how could we help them more actively seek STEM career? Surely the pay's better. And if you or I, we think it's good and we think it's fun, so why don't they? You know, so why don't little kids try to go towards STEM? Well, I'll just say that I've heard a few things, but it's not easy. STEM fields are not easy. It's, in fact, really difficult. You know, some are not built for it. And maybe it's not as sexy as we think it is, you know. I'll just say that.
That's not the reason.
Maybe it isn't, but so as with most things, our STEM careers and most things that matter, they're not just quick sprints. They're kind of like long marathons, right? They're things that kind of delay gratification, things that we have to spend a lot of time on. And completing us, well, I heard this one thing that I wanted to tell you guys, is that it's more like a long marathon full of potholes, hurdles, and other miscellaneous obstacles. Okay, that's one of the things that I've heard, and I just like to repeat that. Kind of like partial differential equation, thermodynamics, and electromagnetics. So they're all kind of like the potholes, you know. So those are there. That's STEM, right? Now for minorities, you have to add a little bit to this mix, right? You have language barriers, some economic difficulties, a few cultural differences, some biases. Lack of educational heritage, I think, is one thing that hurts. And voila. I couldn't read that. I always read voila, and I think that's French, right? So voila, there. When you have minorities, they have that additional barriers, and that causes some of the disengagement, okay? And that's one of the things that we can try to fix. So specifically, you know, the professors, my teachers, my professors, we must find ways to make STEM careers more fun, more hands-on, more real, more useful to our everyday life. I think that would be helpful. Okay, it's helpful for everybody, not just us. And part of this we try to accomplish through mentoring, science fairs, you know, competitions, I don't know, robotics, cyber games, other hands-on type projects that a lot of our industry is involved in. Similarly, you know, all of us kind of go to schools, elementary and other high schools, and we show them our tools, what we use in our craft, how we impact technology, the things that we build, you know, all the cool things that we build. And that gives students a little glimpse into what we do and maybe stir a couple of them into the field. Further, I think, you know, having been with a lot of a lot of teachers, I think you've got to update our theoretical explanations. You know, you got to make them a little better. I mean, there's a lot of it is dry, and the tools are available to make them better. I mean, there's a reasons why a child will, you know, dig into a three-dimensional online game and play for hours, but not do the homework. You know, there's some natural reasons for that, so we should look into that. As an example, about a decade ago, with my publisher, I got a chance to look at the only book I ever wrote back in the 90s, a long time ago, okay? And one of the things that I noticed was that the words were just black and white pictures, the graphs, equations, everything was kind of static, very static. And you know, and I was kind of disappointed in what I saw, but that's how we write our books. I mean, if you look through most of our books, that's what we do. And so especially if you had the misfortune to read my book, you really, really had to like the subject matter in it to read through it, okay? You really had to like it. And so discussing this with my publisher, we agreed that the graphs, the equations, pictures, they need to come alive, be more interactive. And given all the advancements in technology, color, podcasts, video, ebooks, embedded videos, all kinds of CD inserts and stuff, the tools are available to do that. Okay? All the tools are readily available to make that happen. It just takes a lot more time, a lot more effort, more funding, more coordination. Okay? And therein lies the problem. Because if the product was a virtual reality online interactive game with millions of potential users, they'd do it. But not in our STEM field. So therein, there has to be a need and somebody to fill that need, and I think that's one of the things that we could highlight. So our efforts must inspire, they must edify, they must motivate our youth to dream, to innovate, to build something better, faster, sleeker, something more efficient. And so, as stated earlier, demographics are changing. Skills shortage due to baby boomer retirement, lack of interest from our younger generation, and our minority share of that population is increasing. So how do we motivate that segment of the population? I'll leave you guys with just a couple of data points, I guess. Latinos and blacks make up about 27% of the civilian labor population, but they represent only 9% of the science and engineering labor force. Big drop. And they are awarded less than 18% of all bachelor's degrees, 13% of all master's, and 7% of all doctorate. Part of that drop is because, we get tired of going to school, right? Got to get to work. But not all of it is due to that. And this is specifically for minorities. So how do we fix some of that? That drop in the workforce affects nearly 1 million Latinos and blacks. That's a huge amount of power that then could be used to motivate that segment, right? And since we need that segment, that should be part of what we're driving. An interesting fact in the data that I was looking at is that for associate degrees granted, it's nearly par. 26% of all associate degrees granted go to Latinos and blacks. So we're almost up to par there. So what happens between the 2 and the 4 years, and why don't they stay? Why don't we, now when I say they, I mean, why don't we stay? In my case, I was on the decade plan, so I was there forever. In fact, that's an interesting thing, because my mom couldn't understand why I kept staying in school. She kept going, my bachelor's, my master's, my PhD, and said, when are you going to work? It's a different mindset, for my mom, who only got to about 3rd grade in education. Smart lady, though. So we must find the root causes for this lack of participation. And solving that issue may give us an insight on how to continue filling that pipeline. So with that gives us enough time for us to ask some questions. And again, I thank the panel for including.
Thank you very much. So you go ahead and clap. So we do have some time left for questions. Now I have some, of course, because I always have questions to kick this off, but there are microphones in the aisle, and why don't we take the first question from the audience?
Hello, my name is Art Tank. I'm with Lockheed Martin. I'm a Lockheed Fellow. Sandy, I'm amazed at your panel because everybody took this subject from a completely different facet, and every one of you provided some extremely good information, except you guys didn't talk about short, fat, bald guys. because there is a bias to us. But it's also interesting in which facets each of you brought to the panel, because it was extremely interesting to dissect that. So I was told earlier that if I say, with all due respect, I can say anything. So in all sincerity to everybody in the audience and you, My comments are absolutely not meant to hurt anybody's feelings or opinions, but if you notice, we're tiptoeing on a very sensitive subject. You know, we're tiptoeing on racism, we're tiptoeing on bias against women, and we're tiptoeing around by saying we can have a better workforce if we have diversity. And I know this. My job for my last 30 years has been to solve problems. All right, and I solve problems finding a diverse workforce mostly with the way Al described them. I want to find people who do not think like me. I do not need anybody to think like me because I am me. I bring me to the party. Okay. I also find that, help me out, Tom, you're absolutely right. We all clump. And we all clump because when I go into a room and I see a group of black people sitting together, or I see a group of Hispanic people sitting together, I feel like I'm intruding in their space, and I do not go partake in their space because I think I will offend them. And it's not. Now, sometimes I feel a little wild, and I will go sit at a table just to make a presence. And I've done that around here at this conference too, because I find that if I have lunch with somebody I don't know, it's more entertaining, okay? And yet I also do a lot of work, or I try to do more work with schools, because Julio, you're absolutely right. That's the source of our problem in the aerospace industry, is we do not have the minorities and the women coming into the STEM field. And I'm not sure of the root cause of that, but I tutor, I teach, and I mentor, and I try to start at the high school level. But when I talk to the girls and the minorities, they're frankly flatly not interested because it's too hard. They really would rather play the 3D Halo game than learning calculus. And I used to tutor high school algebra, and my students my students all the time, which was for years, were always women. And I averaged getting D's to B's in 1 6-week period, okay? And it's not that they can't, it's that they won't, all right? So I don't know how to address that. But I will tell you that Teddy Roosevelt said way back in the beginning of 1900s that the enemy to the United States and Americans is the hyphen. We sit there and we say African American, Hispanic American, Japanese American, when back in his day it was Polish American, German American, and this kind of thing. And it's the hyphen that breaks us apart as a society. And if we want to try to get everybody more inclusive, we kind of should end the African Engineering Award or the Hispanic Engineering Award. And we ought to call it an engineering award and give it to the people who earn it. And we do know how to earn it. I agree there's biases, and there are biases against people like me who have gray hair. I understand we're trying to revitalize the workforce, but you know, one of the biggest insults I ever had was when somebody said, hey, make sure Art mentors somebody because he doesn't have a lot of runway left. Okay? And so my question for the panel is really the source of the problem is in fact the young kids not coming up into the STEM. So that's what I think we ought to focus on, because frankly all the rest of this, it's going to work itself out as we age and retire. But we got to get the school kids interested in STEM. So how would you folks suggest that we actually get the kids to desire STEM more?
Okay, thank you, Art. Would anyone like to take that?
You know, I have a kid who's not chosen to become an engineer, but he sits around a lot and plays a game that helps design rockets. It's a pretty interesting game, and actually he's learned more about rocketry than I probably did in my intro class. So I think part of what Julio said makes a lot of sense. If we can put more interaction in the material, make it more fun. I mean, why does it have to be a choice between Halo and calculus? Why can't we inspire an online presence that would make people more interested? I can't for the life of me understand why my son doesn't want to go into aerospace engineering because he plays that game a whole lot. Wants to go into medicine, but I continue to prod him. Maybe he'll join us. There's a lot of opportunity. I think also media presence, I think, is important. I've seen a lot of really good commercials. The Air Force has one. Many of the defense contractors have them that show off their products. When I think back about, over 20 years ago, in my decision to be an aerospace engineer, it were the people who came into the classroom with experimental planes. For me, it was the X-29. I was just amazed that an airplane could fly with then backward wings, forward-facing wings. And I wanted to be a part of that. So I think we can do more with capitalizing on the way young people think and social media and all of this great technology. And I also think that more media presence that really inspires us to greatness would help out a lot.
Thank you, Yvette. I think we have a bunch of questions lined up, so next person, please.
Okay, my name is Luisella Giulicchi. I'm an engineer, I'm an aerospace engineer. I read recently a report from the Department of Commerce regarding gender and STEM workforce that was stating that just 25% of the STEM workforce is female. So it's not a very flattering result. But when we look at gender in aerospace or in the aerospace workforce, this dropped to maybe 10%. Only 10% of the STEM, let's say, the aerospace workforce is female. So why aerospace doesn't attract more diversity? It seems an harder environment than the other sector of science and engineering.
Would anyone like to comment why our sector seems to be not as popular?
One observation that I would make, and it's an observation, I don't really know what to do about it, but when people talk about some percentage of engineers are whatever, the data I think is really, I guess I would call it very, very spiky. That there's some engineering disciplines that, for example, attract a lot more women than the other engineering disciplines. And
That was yesterday's award.
At least it wasn't lightning. I don't know.
Very nice.
And so I think if you go out and look at some of the disciplines that tend to attract more females into the curricula, that's reflected in the industry. So I think the issue is not only attracting more diversity into the STEM workforce, but also paying attention to the disciplines that build up that STEM workforce, because the data is not uniform across all those disciplines. That's the problem. I don't know what the fix is, but I think that's an observation that I would make.
Can I make a comment on that also? I especially remarked what Art was saying earlier. If you look at America, I think, if you look at the majority, I think 5% are engineers, right, in the STEM field. It's not that high. And so therefore, when we try to look at women and we try to look at other minority groups, and we expect every woman, every minority group we meet, we expect them to be interested in engineering. I don't think that's reflection. That's the correct view also, because they may also only have a fraction that have interest in our field, right? And to say something is difficult, for our culture, sometimes being a doctor, being a lawyer is more prestigious. And so if you go to other countries, you find there are a lot of women, because engineering is a more prestigious profession. And so I think there is something about culture. So I think sometimes numbers are difficult.
Yeah, so the numbers are 310 million civilian workforce, about 153, and employed in S&E is about 5 million. So just like you guys said, I think part of the problem is that it's not just getting them into science and engineering, but helping them and guiding them to find that thing that they have a passion to do. That's actually, in my opinion, more important. And just to highlight that, I'll tell you that I had 5 undergraduate co-op terms, right? 5. And I had 3 graduate co-op terms. So I was like professional student, right? But I didn't find what I'm currently doing until the fifth term. The fifth term. So where would I be? What would I do had I stopped at 3, as a typical internship? So part of our job is to help our all those we mentor, all those we help out, is to help them find that passion that they have, that they would have. And if you can do that, then you let them go and they will shine, right? They will shine because they like what they do. Now, that in itself can help to build that percentage up to closer to what the young lady was asking. Because other ladies will see somebody in the field, and that can help motivate, kind of pays forward. It continues, it builds. And there's some data that shows that it's not enough to just have some diversity. There has to be a critical mass of diversity. There has to be a certain amount before it actually can generate and create more value. Okay.
Next.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Terry Thornton. I'm an aviation and mechatronics instructor at Dothan Technology Center, Dothan, Alabama. Former military helicopter pilot. And again, to address the crowd, I teach the STEM K-12 initiative. So I grew a program in 6 months from 18 students to 52 students, just to address your comment, making learning STEM very sexy. So a call to action to doing what you're saying instead of just saying it. What are you guys doing to help the STEM K-12 initiative and to better help a program like myself?
You mean you as AIAA, or you as just people generally across industry and government?
Across education to feed the ongoing pipeline of aerospace engineers, starting from the K-12 level, going into higher education to actually feed into the industry.
Mind if I take this one?
No, go.
So what's interesting, I've been studying the K through 12 STEM arena for a while, and what's really interesting about it is there's a lot of activity out there. Even in AIAA, we have technical committees that do STEM outreach, we have local sections that do STEM outreach, we have corporate members that do STEM outreach, there are foundations that do STEM outreach, there are universities that do STEM outreach. There's actually there's a conference put on by U.S. News and World Report to do STEM, to bring these people together. And so the landscape is very crowded, and some of it's local and some of it's national. Some of it focuses on the students, some of it focuses on the teachers, some of it focuses on the parents, some of it focuses on the legislation. So it's really all over the place. And it's an interesting area because it looks very chaotic until you realize that to make a big difference, you really have to have a wide variety of efforts because you're not quite sure what's going to work, because it's really hard to measure. I mean, how do you measure the fact that you've gained someone's interest? And you can kind of over a couple of decades measure that, yeah, we're slowly increasing the statistics. And again, we all know what we can do with statistics to say what we want to do. So I think the most important thing is that what you started off with, which is what you've done as an individual in your local area. And often when we have our individual efforts and you think, okay, you've touched 50 students and maybe you might catch 5 of them. But think about Benjamin Franklin, a penny saved is a penny earned. If everybody did half of what you're doing, if all of us in this room it's like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to excite 10 students, I'm going to mentor 10 students, or I'm going to set up a program where I'm going to touch 10 students every year, that makes a huge difference in the aggregate, right? So this isn't somebody else's problem to go solve, it's our problem to go solve as professionals in engineering, and we each have to reach out and do something. And even if you only touch one student, you're making a difference. If we all touched one student every year, that adds up. And so your point is well taken, and what are we doing? But I will turn that back around and go, what are we doing as a community? Because we as a community each have to reach out and do that. Even if you think you're only doing a little bit, you're actually doing a lot. But there are a lot of STEM programs. I bet that everyone on this stage is involved at least 5 or 10 or 12.
Yeah.
You know, and so to keep that in mind when someone asks you, come to a school and give a talk, or will you talk to the student? This is, by the way, is a target-rich environment. Will you talk to the student about their questions here? Or will you go to your local school district and talk to the elementary students? Or will you train a few teachers? Or you join a group and do something local? This is where we can make a difference. And that's the difference that over a 5-year or 10-year time frame, we'll see the results reflected in the statistics that take a while to catch up. So, I don't know if I answered your question, but hopefully I've inspired you guys to go do something. Sorry guys, I had to take that one. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, which was really a bummer because I think we could talk a while on this subject. So I would encourage you to come and chat with our panelists. If you have further questions, I would encourage you to keep in mind some of the things that we talked about today, the fact that diversity, of course, runs across gender and ethnicity and things, but also, as Al was mentioning, viewpoints and how people are trained and the group think, the cultural think that you get into. We can all learn how that applies to our unconscious biases and affects how we interface in teams. And then you look at your work environment. What are things we can do in our work environment to do the sustaining work that Yvette mentioned? And of course, as Wes pointed out, this is really an economic imperative and not just the right thing to do. In this case, those two things combine together. So thank you for your attendance this morning. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and happy SciTech.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.